Hey everyone, welcome to the A to Z of Sex, or the A to Z of Sex if you're in North America. I'm Dr. Lori Beth Bisbey. I'm a psychologist, sex and intimacy coach, and a gender, sex, and relationship diversity therapist. And I am working my way through the erotic alphabet one letter at a time. I created this podcast to help you learn to express your desires, learn more about desires, spice up your relationships, and create those sizzling relationships that you have always wanted. I do this through solid science, real-life stories, and conversations with an exciting array of experts. Listen in weekly as I share key strategies that will help you choose the relationship style that works best for you and create exactly what you want and need. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes and you can take advantage of the subscriber bonuses. And if you want to know more, head over to drloribethbisbey.com and sign up for my email list so that you can find out exactly what is going on in my world from week to week. But for now, come join me and enter my world of sex and relationships. See you inside. Hey everyone, welcome to the A to Z of Sex, or the A to Z of Sex, depending on your country. With me, Dr. Lori Beth Bisbey. I'm a psychologist and accredited advanced gender, sex, and relationship diversity therapist. And I've spent the last 35 years working with people to help them create and maintain incredible relationships containing sizzling sex and without shame. We are working our way through the erotic alphabet one letter at a time. And this week, the letter is T, and T is for tails. And I have joining me the amazing Cecilia Tan. Cecilia Tan is simply one of the most important writers, editors, and innovators in contemporary American erotic literature, according to Susie Bright, who I also credit heavily. For over 30 years, she's been writing kinky fiction and promoting BDSM community activism. As the author of Telepaths Don't Need Safe Words, Slow Surrender, The Prince's Boy, and many other works of BDSM erotica, and the founder of Circlet Press in the 1990s, she pioneered breaking down the barrier between erotica and science fiction and fantasy. Since then, she's published over 30 novels and short story collections, some with Big Five publishers, some with queer literary presses, and others self-published. In addition to winning the RT Career Achievement Award in erotica and other accolades, she was inducted into the Saints and Sinners LGBT Writers Hall of Fame in 2010. While maintaining her career as a writer and editor, Tan also served as the creator and longtime director of the Fetish Fair flea markets in Boston, Houston, Atlanta, and Charlotte, and was a founder of MOB New England, a trans-inclusive women's leather and BDSM community group, and a founding board member of the New England Leather Alliance. She was a frequent presenter at Living in Leather, the Leather Leadership Conference, and elsewhere. Before retiring from community organizing to concentrate on her writing, she accumulated many leather community awards, including the Pantheon of Leather's President's Award, NLA International Lifetime Achievement Award, and NLA Woman of the Year. A bigender, biracial, bisexual switch, Tan believes the brain is the body's biggest sex organ. She lives in the Boston area with her longtime poly primary partner and one cat. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So we want to talk about writing. I should say, I remember the first book I bought of yours, which was your chapbook, Telepaths Don't Need Safe Words. And as a person who has been a science fiction fantasy fan since I was old enough to read and love erotica and am kinky as hell, finding that was just fucking amazing. It was still one of my favorite pieces of yours, having read probably just about everything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. Telepaths Don't Need Safe Words blew open a lot of doors, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it to like blow things open. You know, it was more like I got to do something because I was writing erotic science fiction for myself. And just not finding anywhere that I could publish it. I mean, I self-published it in 1992, and I was working in book publishing at the time. You know, I sort of fresh out of college, working at a press here in Boston, 9-to-5 job, in the cardigan sweater and all, you know, like doing the book publishing thing, and then going home at night and writing my kinky stories, and, you know, being on the early internet, you know, like on alt sex bondage on Usenet, and just being like, you know, and Telepaths was originally posted in 4 parts to alt sex bondage, because that was when posts couldn't be over 5,000 words long or 5,000 characters long. Maybe there was some limit on how long they could be. So it had to be broken into 4 pieces. That's how long ago this was. I mean, you know, it's like in the old days when we had to chisel things out of rock, you know, and I, you know, in those days when you were going to be a writer, you went and you got the writer's market book out of the library, and you researched the markets, or you know, there were a couple of other like market listings kind of places. Then you wrote to places and you sent them a self-addressed stamped envelope, and they sent you back the guidelines, and you looked to see if your story fit their guidelines and whatever. And of course, every place in the entire writer's market that would take erotica would not take science fiction, and every place that would take science fiction would not take erotica. And I was like, how can this be? Like, how can it be that I'm the only person at this intersection? Like, that just, like, that can't be, right? And this is, of course, before I understood systemic sexism, systemic racism, you know, you know, et cetera. But I was just like, that's so weird, you know? And I just was like, all right, I got to do it myself. And I was always, you know, had that, you know, punk DIY spirit. So I literally photocopied the pages for that first chapbook at my day job at the book publishing house, you know, whatever. Like, I was the assistant in the marketing department, so it was my job to photocopy everything for everyone. And so I would but the photocopier was in our basement, and the marketing offices were on the 3rd floor. So it was my job to collect up everybody's stuff to be photocopied, take it all the way down to the basement, and then be down there for an hour or whatever, and then come all the way back up with everyone's, you know, whatever. So I just, you know, Telepaths, the original one was 40 pages. So that's 10 sheets of, you know, page 1 to 40 and 39, you know, whatever, etc. And just, photocopied it, bought a big stapler for $11. That was my budget. I bought, you know, at Staples, you know, the office supply store. And it's like this big fat thing with giant staples. And, you know, sat on the floor of my apartment, hand stapling that. I hand stapled 100 copies, brought them to a science fiction convention, and I was sold out by Saturday afternoon. Like, I started selling them like out of my bag on a Friday night, where I was just like, I mean, it was literally like I was opening my coat, like, hey, you want some smut, you know, like, and you know, I went to one of the bookstores, you know, that had a table there, and I was like, by the way, do you think, you know, like, they had some of the queer science fiction that had been published, you know, where they had books of Melissa Scott and, you know, some things like that. And I was like, by the way, you might be interested in that. And what I didn't realize is that they had a whole fanzine section that was all like hand stapled, like, you know, Star Trek / fiction and stuff. And there she was like, oh yeah, we would do really well with this. And so, you know, she's like, I'll take 20 or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay. So give her 20 copies. And the next time I walked to the deals room, she's like, how many more do you have? Can I have them all? I'm like, I'm sold out. So it was like, okay, I think maybe we're on to something here, right? And it was just like, that's what it took for everyone to be like, oh, you know, literally people were like telling me the peanut butter and the chocolate can't go together. The peanut butter and the chocolate cannot touch, or like, it's like matter, antimatter. And then of course it was just like Reese's peanut butter cups, where it's like they magically accidentally met together and people were like, oh, it's delicious, right? And it was like, boom, all of a sudden people were like, it just took like somebody to do it. And then it was like, oh, now it's okay to do, kind of. But of course, I mean, it took the mainstream presses a little longer to catch up. But I started getting manuscripts in the mail from, you know, members of the Science Fiction Writers of America and whatnot, being like, oh, I'm so glad you're publishing erotic science fiction. Here's my thing, which I've had in a drawer. You know, and I was like, all right, so I should not just be self-publishing my own work. I should publish the work of others. And, you know, since then, I haven't actually done that much self-publishing except when I had to, right? It's like, for the most part, my work now is published by others, but then I got to publish the work of other people who are like, I can't find a publisher. And it just kind of rolled that way. And now I'm not even the owner of Circlet anymore. Circlet's now an imprint of Riverdale Avenue Books. And so in theory, I'm supposed to have more time to write and more time to, you know, work on my own things and whatnot. I'm still editing a few of my favorite authors from the Circlet days, but But yeah, Riverdale took over their sort of running of the company. So it's like all full circle. So now here I am back to self-publishing again. I'm doing this I'm kickstarting this book called Bent for Leather, which is, you know, all of my absolute queerest, kinkiest stories where and I decided to do this because I'm giving the keynote at International Ms. Leather this year, which is, you know, one of the long-running women's title contest. If you don't know what title contests are, people out there, it's sort of like, imagine if the Miss America pageant, but all in leather. Okay, so and it started with International Mr. Leather, which is all, you know, gay men doing, but it's like, it's a lot like Miss America, where essentially it's a pageant where you show off your outfits, but then you also give a speech about what you're going to do to improve the world, and, you know, so forth and so on. And there are judges, and there are, you know, so forth. And I've served as judge in a lot of different leather contests over the years, and but I never made it to International Ms. Leather. And it's often been on the West Coast, and it's like I don't get to the West Coast as often. I was supposed to fly to the West Coast and give the keynote speech in 2020, of course.
And then it was canceled at the last.
Yep, exactly. They had bought my tickets, they had booked the hotel, you know, it was all set to happen. And then of course, everything shut down. And then there's been no in-person IMSL since then. And so then this year, the contest is actually under new ownership, new management, you know, whatever, a new crew are kind of trying to revitalize it after the pandemic years really, of course, put a big dent in their budget and in everyone's motivation, right? So it's going to be in New Jersey, coming to the East Coast, and they're like, would you still be willing to come and give that keynote speech? And I'm like, yes, it'll be a very different speech than what I might have said pre-COVID, but
yeah,
you know, yeah. So I'm like, all right, let's put together a book of my quote unquote lesbian stories, lesbian kink stories, because all of my previous short story collections have mixed together like gay and straight and men and women and, you know, science fiction and not, you know, whatever, kinky and vanilla. I mean, you know, it's everything all thrown together, right? Because they're just done chronologically. And I'm like, let's do one where it's by topic, you know. And so a lot of these were in lesbian publications like Best Lesbian Erotica, or in On Our Backs magazine back in the days of On Our Backs, and, you know, things like that. But when I put them all together and actually looked at them side by side, I realized that actually the thing they have in common is not that they are quote unquote lesbian stories. It is that every single one of them centers a female-bodied character who is questioning her masculinity, you know, questioning or questing for her masculinity, you know. And I'm like, of course, that's me, you know. And of course, no one but me is surprised by this, because everyone else has been like, yes, of course, you know. It's like, I'm not confused about my gender. I'm confused about the fact that gender has to be a thing in the world, you know. So it's like, what is my gender? I'm a bigender androgyne, and I always have been. So people always want to know what pronouns to use, and I'm like, any and all are perfectly fine, and I never know what to check on that. They give me a bunch of boxes. They give me more boxes than ever now, and I can't check any of them because, you know,
worse. It's bloody worse now than it was, because back in the day, it didn't matter. You were just you. And I actually kind of found that easier, because you could self-describe.
I suppose. I think we have more versions of self-description. And I understand why pronoun usage is so validating for a lot of people, and why using the correct pronouns for people is so important to use it to validate people's experience. But I read recently a speech that Leslie Feinberg, also known as Les Feinberg, gave in like 1995 maybe, or 93. It was like back in the early days. And I used to work at Beacon Press, which was the publisher that published Transgender Warriors, which was one of Les's books. And on the Beacon website, there's the transcription of a speech. And in the speech, Les talks about how pronouns have to change depending on the context. And it was like, when I'm in a this is at like a transgender conference of sometimes. And it was like, when I'm at a transgender conference like this, you should use he, him, because then you are validating that I have chosen this masculine presentation. But when I'm out in the regular world, where I can pass as a man or be quote unquote mistaken for a man, you should use she, her, because otherwise you erase that I'm trans.
Interesting.
Yeah. And what was interesting about this is that, of course, in the early 90s, most of the quote unquote advice that we were given if you had gender dysphoria or, were considering any form of transition was that like you could only be considered for transition if you kind of wanted to go all the way. You know what I mean? And it was like you were supposed to never mention your past. It was like you had to go into like the witness protection program. It was like, never use your dead name, don't this, don't that. And it was like, and for many people, that is the right choice. I mean, and cutting themselves off from former toxic relationships and, so forth and so on really is the best thing for their mental health. But it isn't for everyone, and for people who are like, I have a complicated gender identity and gender history, and my point is not to just go from one extreme to a sort of simple answer. Now I am a man, and it's like was sort of eye-opening to me. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And
well, there are so many people that wouldn't fit.
Right, exactly.
There's always nuance. I think the problem I end up having is, of course, social media and the internet don't encourage nuance. So everything becomes, you fall in one bucket or you fall in another.
Right. We just have more buckets. But I do like that nowadays, like non-binary is being essentially accepted as an identity unto itself. What confuses people out who are looking at it from the outside is that then they want all non-binary people to be the same. And what we're trying to say is, but the part of this definition is that we are not all the same, so in the same way as bisexual was like, people are not all bisexual in the same way. We're not all, whatever. But of course, people want labels to be reductive and easy so that they can be like, oh, I know what you are. I know what you are. And it's like, I have to actually tell you, you don't know what I am. But maybe if you read my books, you might get a clue.
That's why I identify as queer, because queer usually means people have to ask me. Because I mean, my gender identity is actually simple. I'm female. I've always been female. I've never had a question about that. There's never been an issue. For me, that's how it is. But my sexual identity is anything but simple.
Right.
And so, but for the most part, has to do with power exchange. And so, people would insist that I identify my sexual orientation based on the gender of people I'm interested in. And I was like, I don't care.
Right.
Are they dominant? Are they dominant?
Right.
Yeah. Then I'm interested in them.
Right.
Are they submissive sexually? We're not going to connect. Right. And
whereas I'm a switch, so that also is important to me, but I have much more freedom, so the thing that's interesting is that, so putting this collection together, right? So I put all these stories together, lined them up in a row, I looked at them, and I realized that why all of my gender explorations, or all of these characters that I kept inserting who are, assigned female at birth, but are now asserting some form of masculine identity or trying to figure out sort of where they fit in a sort of masculine context, is because the sexuality in the story is all about the kink. And when it's all about BDSM and power exchange and, whatever, it's like the genitalia are the last thing that are actually getting involved most of the time. And, some of the early stories, the only reason that I end up putting some actual genitalia in there is because editors were like, you need to specify what this character is, or whatever, kind of a thing. And like that's the classic like writers group kind of advice, right? Oh, you've got to specify whether it's science fiction or fantasy. You have to specify whether the ending is happy or sad, or if it's whatever. And I was like, but like Marge Piercy's Woman on the Edge of Time is a happy ending if you believe it's science fiction fantasy, and it's a tragic ending if you believe it's literature.
True.
Like that kind of a thing where you're like, so nobody says Marge Piercy isn't literary great, right? So it's like, okay,
you don't have to, you just think you have to.
Right, exactly. So so here are all these stories where I was kind of messing with the gender, and then the stuff that I have been writing more recently, most of those have been written basically since I got challenged by, you probably knew Corey Alexander.
Yeah.
Who also wrote under the name Zan West.
Yeah.
Corey was a trans activist, a BDSM activist, a fat activist, a top, and a great writer and a great advocate for writers. And Corey basically challenged not just me, but I think a lot of writers, because I've now told the story and I've heard it from other people, to decouple your erotica from specifying genitalia in order to make room for your trans and intersex readers to not get thrown out of the story. And of course,
Right.
it's a thing in romance overall that people write characters in such a way that the reader can self-insert. Like, this is a technique that you do, right? And I'm like, you can write erotica that's extremely hot, extremely, whatever, and still allow people of any gender to self-insert if you are basically careful about it. So almost all the erotic stories I've written in the past 4 years, well, I guess 3 years, have been Corey passed in 2020 and issued this dictum about a year before that. So yeah, about 3-4 years. I've been like, all right, fine. And then and they work. I mean, some of these are some of the best stories I've ever written. I've read them at some things, whatever, and people are just like, wow, that was like the most amazing, you played with the language so nicely and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, because I was essentially forced to, because I essentially took specifying gender as a cliche that I'm now avoiding. And
Wow.
I'm not going to avoid it in every story, but it's in fact, some of the stories now that I'm writing, I'm back around to specifically talking about characters who are born female and now are negotiating through sort of an identity which is different from what maybe their outward appearance is, and so forth. So it's just been a really interesting ride, if you want to call it.
I'm so looking forward to seeing this as a collection. I imagine that I don't know if I will have read everything. I do tend to read everything you put out. But it'll be interesting for me to actually see that as a collection together, because I think you're going to read them differently when they come as a collection like that.
Right.
I wonder, I mean, I write a whole, I've only been actually putting out anything that I wrote in the last sort of 5 years. And I write a lot less fiction. Because I'm mostly, when my writing time gets stuck writing nonfiction, which is important and great, but it's not as much fun. I wonder if I could accomplish writing it without the genitals, without gender. It would be an interesting exercise for me to see what it would be like to try and do that. I don't think I'm an accomplished enough writer of fiction to pull it off, but I'd give it a damn good try to see what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, and it's helpful that literally, because I'm often writing sort of BDSM and whatever, then it's like, if you're talking about, the hand spanking the ass or whatever, it's like,
that doesn't have to have
it could be anybody's butt, whatever. And there are so many central parts of a human that are not the genitalia, or that are not, whatever. It's just, that I'm like, I can sidestep this whole thing, or I can sidestep it until I decide what gender this character is, because sometimes I just haven't decided, and then it was a lot of my early stories. I realized later, I only made this, cis gay because then that was the market I was going to send it to, or I only made this, whatever, because depending on where I thought I could sell it too, and it's like, and of course the markets are very, very divided by genre and flavor and, so forth. So it's like, it's like, for it to go to honor backs, I needed to specify that it was, that this is female characters, and for it to go to, best gay erotica, obviously it has to be, etc. So
although I have to say, for me, I've never felt kicked out when it wasn't. For me, when I read as a reader, I've gotten just as turned on by like completely two men,
right.
No, like I can feel myself in that story anyway. I've never, and that's just me as a reader. That's the way I read. I don't have to fit it to get turned on by it. So I read everything. If I like an author, then I read everything that author's ever written. I mean, and I go on from there. And I'm stubborn about new authors too, as I've gotten older. It's like something really has to stand out before I'll grab it, because it's like, but but these people are putting things out. And so I only have this much time for reading. I'm gonna go over it where I know.
Right.
But when it comes to erotica, it doesn't. So it's interesting to me because I know some people would really feel like, I know some people who would never read gay erotica because they're not gay.
Yeah. But I know so many, yeah. Whereas I know so many people who do read gay erotica who are not gay.
Yeah, me too.
And part of it is because sometimes people don't want to see themselves in the fiction, you know, and they just want to read about those people over there and, you know, kind of and enjoy it in a kind of way where you don't have to feel it viscerally as, you know, like I've got friends who love romance. They love the love story and so forth and so on, but they're like, but I can't read another one that is too similar to my own situation, you know, where they're like, I'm in a crappy marriage that I, you know, whatever. And it's my doing to, you know, my choice that I were staying together and whatever, and trying to work out our stuff. And, but yeah, the last thing I want to do is read a book that reminds me of what we just talked about in therapy, you know? And so they're like, but I can read about two men having relationship issues and then working out their stuff and having hot sex and whatever, because then I don't have to keep seeing myself in it.
There's enough distance.
Enough also, distance. Exactly.
I find with clients sometimes that they want to read something that doesn't reflect them because they're afraid if they like the fantasy and it reflects them, it means they have to do it.
Right.
Right. You know, so
right.
like
there's that also.
You know, two men beating each other, then I can live with that because I might find that really hot.
Right.
But I'm not a man, so I don't have to do it. Right. And I always find that so sweet. It's like, you don't have to do it anyway.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Trying to tell people that, yes, your fantasies are valid as fuel, even if you are not going out and buying the corset and putting the thing on or taking the classes and how to tie or, you know, whatever. It's just like, you can just, yeah, exactly. One of the reasons I like to write erotic science fiction is because then it's really clear we are now in a fantasy world, you know, where it's like, okay, we're disconnected from our current political context, our current way we think of gender. Maybe I can put alternative family structure in if I want, you know, things like that. I can put in a magic way to get rid of STDs. I can, you know, just all those things, right? So it's...
Well, it leaves it more for enjoyment. It's one of the things that I enjoy about, I mean, I think science fiction and fantasy in general, and then erotic science fiction specifically, it allows you to step outside some of the stuff in your head.
Right.
But it also allows you to explore things. James Williams, But I Know What I Want, that collection of some of the deepest, darkest stories I have ever read that I adore. There are things in there that you just don't want to like. You know, like they are so fucking challenging. And yet they're really hot. And it's like, oh, I should not be being turned on by this. This is really... So there's... But
James was such a good... James was such a good writer that he could basically make you kind of like things that you wouldn't have otherwise liked. And I find this true in like fanfic that I write also. Under a pseudonym, I wrote like over 1 million words of Harry Potter fanfic in the mid 2000s. When my regular career was in a slump, I stayed in shape by writing fanfic. And I, you know, found a very supportive community of, guess what, women and queer people, you know, who... who were just very into exploring all kinds of things. And that meant both through literary conventions, like you could be experimental in a way that like your regular writers group would just be like, what the hell is this? You're not Robert Coover or whatever. And, or this was too confusing, to, you know, people are like, if Harry and Draco are going to kiss at the end of it, I'll read any kind of experimental format you want. You know, and that kind of a thing. And because it's non-commercial, it's all free, all shared, you know, it's just a gift economy of, you leave a like if you liked it, or you leave a comment, you know, and then maybe you write a story for somebody who wrote a story that you liked, you know, like that kind of a thing. And just, you know, so you're not being driven at all by the market, right? It's just the market of attention of like, what do people like? What do you like? Self-expression was the name of the game, right? And it's like, so many of those, you know, I'd write some kink or whatever, and I would get the comments that were like, I never thought that I would like such and such, but I like this, you know, that kind of stuff. Or like there's one famous one, oh gosh, what's it called? I've forgotten the name of the fic, because so I want to think of it so that you can Google it if you want. But it's basically a Snape, Draco, Harry threesome water sports
Wow.
series. It's like a series, so like it's like they gradually explore water sports more and more, and 90% of the comments are people being like, oh my god, this is so hot, this is so amazing. I never thought that I, like this was on my list of squicks that I never wanted to read. And then, but I read your other thing, and it was co-written by two writers. I want to say one of them, her fanfic name was Cruise Director, and the other one was, oh, I can't believe I'm forgetting this, because this is one of those, like, I read this over and over and over again, and probably if you Google Cruise Director water sports Harry Potter, you may come up with it.
Get it.
But
okay, cool.
Whereas if you just put Cruise Director water sports, I'm not responsible for what you might find on the internet. But, besides the fact, then your cookies will be trying to sell you Carnival Cruise Lines trips or something.
Forever.
Oh my God. Yeah, forever, exactly. But yeah. But
no, and I love that. I love that
whole people being like, they're so taken in by the writing and by the character and whatever the character's kink is, they're like, okay, I can believe this. And I said, it's not to me that different from what a character eats in a story, whatever. It's like, yeah, maybe you don't like spicy food in real life because it indigests you or whatever, but you go through the sort of sensual experience of the character. If the character likes it, then you like it for them anyway. And
you have to buy into that, and that's one of the things about one of the things I love about that whole world of reading, which is why to me it's so important that people keep writing. I mean, I've noticed recently AI cropping up in stories and stuff, and while it's it's very useful to help me write a blog, because what it will mean is, instead of spending 5 hours writing something, I'll spend 2, because it'll still take me 2 hours to edit, get rid of the crap, and put the best stuff of mine in. But the filler stuff, I can have somebody else write. That's not a problem. The definition, the 100th time you wrote the definition of whatever, which you would have cut and paste in the past. Now AI just brings it up for you. But
Yep. Sorry, the cat just decided to get out of my lap all of a sudden. What are you? Can you not do that right now? Okay, there.
I love it. Our animals are so much fun. But that whole trend towards people writing less and less, and people really having trouble with the idea, even with audiobooks, with the idea of reading. It's like they don't realize that if this goes, then there's no story creation.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
some of the best story creation is what happens in writing.
I think we go through phases as humans in the way that we consume stories, overall, and that every new invention of a new medium, and so forth, is going to shift that somewhat, but that you're always still going to need people who can do that kind of deep work, if you want to call it that, both the writing and the reading of it, and editors who can edit on that deep level. And that, even though, TikTok is so popular and, so forth and so on, what is TikTok doing? It's driving the sales of books. Yeah. Like, TikTok is the #1 driver of book sales. And most people would not have expected that. Your average pundit would be like, oh, TikTok is all about short attention span and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and then what do? They go out and buy books, and they're reading them too. It's not like they just buy them and don't, So it's like they're driving the sales of books. They drove many, many books up the bestseller list at a time when, the book industry is in all kinds of trouble. Book industry is always in some kind of trouble, first of all. And then everyone thought that 2020 was going to be this terrible year because all the bookstores were closed and whatever. And it turned out to be one of the best years ever, because people turned to buying, especially backlist books that were already in stock, because guess what? People had time on their hands, and they rediscovered that they wanted to spend more time reading, and they wanted to spend more time shutting out all the bad news, the Twitter, whatever, etc. And they wanted to spend that quiet time. And especially with physical books, we thought, oh yeah, because ebooks will boom because people are at home and they can just download them. No, people went and did curbside pickup at their independent bookstores all over, and not just in the United States, all over the world. And it was like, well, that's interesting. So much for the death of reading, the death of the book, and whatever. People still value, and it's not generational. It's not like, oh, it was all old people doing it. It's like every generation rediscovers what are their books, what are their voices that they, and then they read them over and over again too. It's like,
well, yeah, that was the other thing. So like I have a set of books I read every year since oh my God, since 1984. Was it? Yeah, no, it was 1984. And usually once a year. Yeah, once a year. And this year I'm on my fourth time through.
Oh gosh, because they're your comfort reads.
Yes, and it's like I want to sit in that world for a while. And someday I will probably, I've written little sketches to continue the story, because they're not going to be continued ever, right? The author is never going to pick this project up again, ever. Right. That author's gone on to other things that have no resemblance to any of the things that I love, right? So I'm like, I should take the story further. I should do it. And I never have, but I think maybe I will now that I'm on the fourth time through. I can like recite dialogue,
the archive of our own is always waiting for your fanfics at any time.
Oh my God, there's so much to do there. There's so much to do there.
It's funny because I keep thinking that I've sort of left some of my previous worlds behind, and then these story opportunities or story ideas come up. So it's like I keep thinking I've written the last story I'm ever going to write in Magic University, say, and it's like, and then like an anthology comes along and I'm like, oh, a Magic U story would work there, so it's like we did an anthology, I think came out last year, called School Books and Sorcery, and it's undoubtedly on the shelf behind me now if I went and looked for it, but it's a YA collection, but of all sort of magic school stories, right, that are sort of post Harry Potter, and not explicitly stated is that there are lots of sort of queer and trans characters in this anthology. And guess what? I wrote an assigned female at birth character but she's a teenager who's trying to figure out her gender stuff. At the same time, of course, she's figuring out her magic stuff, which is, of course, all tied together, right? So, it has a cameo from one of the main characters from Magic U, whatnot like that. And he's also never really dealt with his gender stuff. And he's the love interest. He's not the main character in the series. So it's like, so you get to see from his point of view a bit more, some of what's going on with him, and, things like that. And I'm like, okay, that was fine, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm all right, that nice little cap on Magic University. And then somebody just sent me a call for submissions for like a dark academia, anthology, which is, I guess, a genre unto itself now, dark academia. And I'm like,
oh my God,
there is a lot of stuff that would fit in it, so who knows, maybe another Magic U story will be coming along, but first I have to write another story for Bent for Leather, though, because the Kickstarter, it reached a goal where now I have to write a new story. And then I had a party for backers online the other night, and we played some games, and the prize for the ultimate winner was I let them send me 3 prompt words that I'm going to use in the story, or
oh, fun.
Yeah, so now I'm like, okay, so now I just got the words in email, so now I have my assignment cut out for me. I have to, it's like, okay, write an erotic story that fits with the other stories in this collection, so some kind of kinky, lesbian / trans male, erotica, and that has the following things, so it's like, okay, I'm not going to reveal what the words are. I'll wait, you have to read the book to find out what they are, but yeah.
But I can't wait.
It will fit right in. So yeah. So I have writing time later today. The Science Fiction Writers of America has an online writing date every Sunday afternoon, where it's basically like force yourself to write by peer pressure. So we all get in a Zoom and we, set a timer and etc. And so it's like,
I think that's a great idea.
That's what I'm doing with my writing tonight. Is I'm going to try to write a new story.
I love it. I used to do that with a friend of mine, where we just did time trials, and we stopped, and we really should start again, because it keeps me on task when I do shit like that.
It's like having a gym buddy who goes to the gym with you, except that it's writing.
Yeah.
Hello.
Superb.
Okay, he's back.
So everybody, if you don't know Kickstarter, go look it up. It's great. It's a fabulous way to crowdfund. There are a few crowdfunders. Kickstarter is probably I think was one of the first, and
Yeah.
is one of the most robust. This Kickstarter is still live. You've got a couple more days. Do go and contribute to this Kickstarter. Grab yourself a fun perk. And also see if there's more stretch goals that can be reached.
I think the next one that's coming up is another piece of interior art. We already got one piece, and so now a second one, if we pass another $500 threshold, I think the next one is another piece of interior art. And then I think if we reach 4,000, I haven't checked it today, so it might well have while I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, so a couple days left to add a couple more things. And and right now I'm not planning to sell this book to a publisher. Right now and I mean, maybe a publisher will take it, but right now it's in the state where no publisher was sort of interested in this kind of thing. And I'm like, I can actually earn more by publishing it myself, and then I can do it the way I want. And I don't have an editor telling me, but you have to specify the genders of these characters.
I think
I'm not.
Sometimes people don't realize that, oftentimes self-publishing actually nets the author more money. And
right.
I've made that choice myself. I particularly did that with my erotic memoir, because there's no way that an editor would have passed some of the stuff that I put in. And I was like, but it's my story. It's my life.
Right. Exactly.
And so I want to put my erotica with my life, and I don't want to be told this is too severe or
exactly.
So I decided I wouldn't even try. But also, I mean, if I told you what my royalties are for the book that I have with a mainstream author, how the book was written in '98, and I still probably have not been paid for the amount of time I spent on that book, it's hard, there's kudos in going with the major publisher, but it definitely, and you do get a larger readership, but it definitely does not, it doesn't pay most authors a living wage.
Yeah, agreed. And, I've had books of every size, and I've published with every different publisher. And when they pay off, like when the gamble pays off, a book does really well, and then it does well in several countries, and, so forth and so on. And then it's like all of a sudden you pay off all your credit card debt that you had built up over the past 20 years of promoting yourself, and, so forth and so on.
Right.
But, that one bestseller can wipe out 20 years of, not whatever. But then you go, I'm in the stage now. We were just talking about how it's like, oh, unexpected dental work or unexpected veterinary bills. It's like, no, I don't have that cushion. So,
authors absolutely need their self-publishing, their fan communities, their Patreons, all of these ways in which they are helped to have the wages that they should have, because it's really only the J.K. Rowlings and stuff that don't have to think about it.
Right, exactly. There's a small little tip of the iceberg that are at the very top of the money curve, and Stephen Kings of the world, and and it's you can't really count them as like the example, because there's such a small number of people. It's like, just like there's only so many whatever Elon Musk's and Jeff Bezos's and whatever, but it's like but many of the people who work for them, in tech, are still receiving, decent wages, but then a lot of people working in the warehouses and, whatever, aren't. And it's like in the publishing biz, it's like the writers are the people in the warehouse who are always scrabbling for the last piece of the profit puzzle, so, and of course, without us, there is no industry, there's no product. But, try telling that to, a major late stage capitalism corporation.
True.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So do go contribute to this Kickstarter. Is there any other way that people should get in touch with you if they want to get in touch? And where's the place to find your books?
Yeah, I'm easy to Google. You can find me at ceciliatan.com. You can also, if you use a service called bookshop.org, which is an alternative to Amazon if you are like me, boycotting Amazon because of shenanigans with union busting in their warehouses, or whatever, or you just don't like them, for other reasons. Bookshop.org is a great place to essentially buy books online, and then they donate money back to independent bookstores, to local independent bookstores, so that, they're helping to really sort of sustain the industry in a way that's much more sustainable. And then, like with Amazon, authors can create referral links. So if you buy through bookshop.org after going through my website to get there, I get a kickback too. So that's a great way. Honestly, the best way to support authors is buy their books however you prefer to buy them. Every copy you buy at Amazon helps the algorithm to bring an author's books up in searches more often. Things like that. If you buy your books at Target, that's great too, like wherever. Probably I don't have any books in Target right now, but there have been times when that's one of the reasons to go to the major publishers, so that the book is piled up in Target and your mom's friends can take pictures of it and tag you on Facebook being like, I saw your book in Target.
I don't think I ever got to Target, but I did end up in Barnes and Noble, and that was a big deal. Family, friends.
Right.
People family, friends are like,
Right. So much fun when my mom's friends are tagging me on Facebook and being like, I saw Peggy's daughter's book on the bed.
I love it.
Yeah, they're great.
They're great. Brilliant. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Okay, guys, thanks so much for listening again this week. And next week, the letter will be you. As usual, I am asking you to leave a review. I recognize that so many of you don't like to take the time to do this, but please leave a review. If you do, you'll be entered in the draw for a free half hour with me. You can talk about whatever you want. You can ask any questions you want. And these days, it's really hard to get time with me for free. So this is the easiest way to do it. Do email me that you've left the review so I know to throw your name into the pot. I draw one name a month. If there's only one review in a month, then only one name is there to get drawn. So who knows, it might even be easy. You never know. If you've got ideas for shows or people that you want to hear, please email me. It's LoriBeth at drloribethbisbey.com. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe, and I will see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in. You were just listening to the A to Z of Sex, or the A to Z of Sex if you're in North America. If you enjoyed the show, please do leave a review wherever it was you listened to it, but especially head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Reviews really help the show get out there. If you want to support my work, you can support it through my Patreon page. That's Dr. Lori Beth Bisbey on patreon.com. You can also head over to drloribethbisbey.com and subscribe to my free mailing list, which will keep you updated as to the activities I am getting up to and any special appearances. For people who subscribe to the Patreon, there are special broadcasts, merch, and the opportunity to get discounted tickets to a lot of the events that I do. Knowledge gives you power. The more you know, the better your relationships, the better your satisfaction and joy. If you've got suggestions for the show, comments, or questions, do email at LoriBeth at drloribethbisbey.com, and I will try and incorporate them. Have a wonderful week filled with loads of joy.